Welcome to the Fantasy Formula 1 podcast, where we use fake money to buy real F1 teams to win imaginary points. I'm Paul. Ben is out today. He is on holiday, and he'll be back next week. And we are discussing everything that happened in Las Vegas leading up to the Qatar Grand Prix, specifically as it has to do with the fantasy F1 game. Leading up to this moment, Ferrari and you had Mercedes, and they were going back and forth, back and forth. Some have good days, some have bad days, but they were the peer-to-peer adversaries, all right? And then you had McLaren, much like they did in 2023. They had a rough start to 2023 and finished really strong. Well, they got off that schneid early in 2024, and then they were peer-to-peer adversaries with Red Bull. They passed Red Bull, and I'm not trying to get on the Sergio Perez hate train, but mathematically, Sergio Perez is not putting up the points that Max Verstappen is. Since Sergio Perez is not putting up as many points, and Ferrari and Mercedes is having two drivers that were both putting up points-ish, since McLaren has two drivers that are regularly in the top six, two drivers that are regularly competing for the top three, and Red Bull doesn't have that. McLaren was able to pass Red Bull in the real-world Constructors Championship, and why that matters for us in the fantasy world is that when you're picking two constructors for your fantasy team, just because you have Max Verstappen and he's putting up solid points, it's smarter money to get the McLaren constructor because both of those drivers were putting up great points. McLaren passed Red Bull in the real-world constructors. And then you have Ferrari, and then you have Mercedes. Ferrari figured everything out before Mercedes did. Ferrari then passed Red Bull in the constructors. Current snapshot is Ferrari has 584 real-world constructors points, and Red Bull has 555. McLaren has 608. When you win a race, I think it's like 25 constructor points, so it's still within grabs. If McLaren does really poorly this race and Red Bull double podiums, then that could be this huge swing. If both Ferraris crash like they did or DNF like they did earlier in the season, then suddenly everything will be switched around again. So we have a three-way fight for the constructors real world. And why that matters for fantasy F1 is everybody's still in it to win it. With the Qatar race, now that we have Mercedes seems to be back, who should you pick? Well, Mercedes, and this isn't 100% my analysis. I want to make sure I give credit where credit's due. Julian Palmer does great analysis on fantasy on the F1 website, and Mercedes seems to do good when everybody else does bad. And it's not me saying that everyone else does bad, and that's why Mercedes is good. But what I'm saying is Mercedes does better when things are just off base a little bit, when the weather's too cold, when the track has really weird conditions. All of this, they just seem to shine when things are non-standard. It just seemed like they really pulled it together. So the punchline of all this is right now in fantasy F1, Red Bull, McLaren, Ferrari, and Mercedes. There is a strong argument to have any two of these teams as your constructor, and any pairing of these four teams could actually be the best way to go. The only team that I would try and drop from that recommended list would be Red Bull, but that's only because Red Bull Racing doesn't have two drivers that are going to be consistently getting you points. As soon as Sergio Perez is competing against drivers like Yuki Tsunoda and the Haas team, and it just means he's not putting up the points, he's not getting the track position, and so I want to drop Red Bull from that. So the Qatar race, the Grand Prix is at 7 p.m. With the Grand Prix being that late, it is a desert, got it, so it'll be as cool, but it won't be a 10 p.m. race in the desert like it was in Las Vegas, because Las Vegas was colder, they were running later at night, it benefited Mercedes. I can't sit here and say, hey, you should not have Mercedes on your team. I think you should. I think you should have Mercedes, I think you should have Ferrari, and I think you should have McLaren. If Max Verstappen is on a good run of form and he can offset all the points Perez isn't going to get, then you can go Red Bull too, but the money, the cost-benefit ratio isn't there. Mercedes, McLaren, or Ferrari, any two of those teams, you'll be fine. And I genuinely don't know which is best. I think you need to watch the coverage before you make your final selection. And as soon as you hear the announcers talking about how cool it is, if you see the announcers talking about how good these sort of environments, benefit Mercedes and all that, then you should probably take that into account. The second factor from Las Vegas that is important to remember for Qatar is that there was a lot of tire degradation issues in Las Vegas. If you look at the pit stop summary for Vegas, it was a 2-stop strategy. The pit stop summary of Qatar in 2023 had everybody on a 3-stop strategy, some rolling over to 4. A long time ago, F1 got rid of refueling in the pits because it was too big of a fire hazard. It cost a lot of money to bring all the refueling equipment around, and we can go into that in a different episode. So they got rid of fueling. So you fill up with fuel and the cars get faster and are easier on their tires the further into the race they get. I know you can't watch a Formula One race without hearing the talking heads, myself included, talk about downforce and things like that. Again, you can get this from Julian Palmer's analysis on F1.com. Mercedes had more downforce. Ferrari and McLaren had less downforce. So Mercedes had the right amounts and they were able to get the best performance out of their car. Everybody had real bad tire degradation, though. Everyone did 2 stops, some did 3. In Qatar coming up, it seems to be similar. It's going to be cooler at night, yeah, like I mentioned. But also, everybody's going to be on a 3-stop strategy. Some went to 4 last year. If you're looking for a basic strategy, I say split your strategy. Have some Mercedes and Ferrari. Have some McLaren and Ferrari. Avoid Red Bull. Spread the other 3 constructors across your 3 teams. If you have to pick a driver, say take Sainz over Leclerc. Sainz seems to be getting it together more than Leclerc does recently. If you're picking one Mercedes driver, pick Russell over Hamilton. Again, Hamilton's done really well. He's gotten really, really good points, especially last week. However, Russell seems to get together better and faster and have better qualifying. And if you're going to go with the McLaren, if you just need one McLaren driver, go with Lando Norris. Oscar Piastri is doing fine. Well, that's your brief before the Qatar Grand Prix. Please like and subscribe. It does help us out and helps us be able to do this more next year. Good luck. Cheers.